Good evening and welcome to this regular town board meeting of the Ulysses Town Board in July 25th, 2023. And I will call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. We do have an agenda that was posted. I'm hoping we can make a couple small tweaks to it. We need to include, if the board is amenable, include an item to a voucher for the painting bid at the exterior of Town Hall. So this is a voucher. We'll get to it. We approved a contract already on that.
Some of the fun you missed while you were gone.
Yep, scintillating. So I'm hoping we can add that. That would be, I'm looking up the correct title, payment of audited claims, and I would, we could do it as number 9, because I do not have any board notifications. So we could cross out board notifications and payment of audited claims.
Is that it?
That's all I have. Is there
Motion to approve as amended?
Wonderful. Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'm sorry? We did. We even had a special town board meeting to review everything. Oh, we didn't do roll call. I'm sorry. I just moved right on. Don't know.
Ms. Weatherby.
Present.
Mr. Goldman. Ms. Olson.
Present.
Mr. Boggs.
Present?
Ms. Bouchard.
Present.
Full attendance of the town board.
You make it sound like that's not a usual occurrence, and we are usually here. Usually. Okay, that brings us to privilege of the floor. Is there anyone in the public, either in person or online, who is interested in addressing us on any topic? So feel free to come off mute. We have up to 3 minutes. We don't have anybody in person, but if there's, doesn't look like anybody's jumping at it online, there will be a second opportunity at the end of the meeting. With that, I would like to welcome our first presentation. We have Insero presenting. It's actually on the, I just realized this, on the agenda, it says the 2023 audit report. Obviously 2023 is not over. This is the 2022 audit report. And I am also very pleased to welcome Blixie and Michelle with us today also. Is there anything either you'd like to say in advance of the presentation?
Just that there's hard copies there if anybody wants one, but you all have it electronic.
Wonderful. If either of you would like to come and sit up here so you can actually see the screen, you're welcome to.
I just turn around.
Yeah.
I'll probably just stand for a while.
Okay,
That's
wonderful.
okay.
Absolutely. Make yourself comfortable. Please welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Mr. Wade.
Well, thank you for, oh, sorry.
I just wondered if you needed screen sharing privileges.
I might. I had sent a PowerPoint earlier today, but I'm not sure if you got it.
I don't recall seeing it.
Okay.
I saved, it's in your inbox, Krista, or I can tell you where it is on All Share.
I can go ahead and screen share if that's easier. I've got it up on my computer.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Just gotta give you.
Okay. Oh, well. Bear with me 1 minute because I tried to do something different and it didn't work. Okay. Okay. All right, so hopefully everybody can see that, that presentation.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. So this boils down all of the reports that we issued into just a few pages. It hits a few highlights for you, just to kind of summarize. Before I get into the presentation itself, I just want to thank Blixie, Michelle, everybody at the town for all of their help. They were very easy to work with, as always. Very responsive, got us everything, as quickly as they could. And we were able to get through the information that we needed pretty quickly and get things resolved and finalized in pretty good order. So that's always helpful when we're able to get through everything quick. So what you have in front of you now is just kind of a summary of the reports that are issued and the results of each one of those. We've issued an unmodified opinion, a clean opinion on the financial statements themselves. That's the kind of opinion you want. Means that we believe the financial statements are fairly stated, don't require any modifications to be fairly stated. Because we do the audit in accordance with government auditing standards, we also have to issue a report on internal control and compliance. That report identified no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, and no non-compliance with laws and regulations. So that's also a clean report. And that's included in the bound packet at the very end of the bound packet is where that report is. And then outside of the financial report, there are a couple of other documents that are issued as part of the audit process. We've issued a management comment letter, which identifies no weaknesses and no deficiencies in the control system. It just refers you to some upcoming changes in accounting standards that we'll talk about this evening right at the end of our presentation. And then we also have what you see in front of you, a required communications letter. Auditing standards require that we communicate certain aspects of the audit with the board at the conclusion. That's what this letter does. And this letter doesn't have anything concerning. It's mostly boilerplate language. It talks about the changes in accounting standards that were effective this year that we'll refer to at the very end. There were no difficulties, no disagreements with management during the audit. Estimates are always part of financial statements. We evaluate the estimates, we evaluate the underlying assumptions, didn't have any concerns in that area. No other audit findings to present and nothing else in that letter to be concerned about. So all of the reports that we've issued were all clean with no findings. So that's certainly good news. So now what you see in front of you, I did want to go into a little bit of the financial statement information, just kind of hit some of the highlights about some of the balance sheet accounts, some of the income statements, some of the activity statement accounts. This is very summarized information, so the statements themselves are quite a bit more detailed, but this gives you a sense of where things are. This page and the next couple of pages is just townwide general fund. You can see here, we're showing you trend information, so you can see 2020, 21, 22. I should note, as noted at the bottom, the 2020 information wasn't audited. So this 2020 just comes from the AUD that was filed. For 2022 compared to 21, roughly a $200,000 increase in total assets. Cash and investments increased about $330,000. Receivables declined about $130,000. So the net effect of that is that $200,000 increase. Most of that increase, if you look at the bottom of this page, comes from an increase in liabilities. you can see total liabilities increased about $150,000. And that is the unearned ARPA money. So as that money is spent, it'll be earned and it'll be brought into revenue. But until you spend it, it stays as a liability on the general fund. So assets increased about $200,000, liabilities increased about $150,000. The net effect of that is an increase in fund balance of about $60,000, as you can see here, from $1,114,000 to $1,175,000. The two main changes here, the assigned went up, the unassigned went down. The assigned going up is just a function of the budget for 2023. More was appropriated in the 23 budget than was appropriated in the 22 budget out of the general fund. So, but again, total fund balance increased, as you can see at the top of that slide. Then the bottom of this slide shows revenues. Again, very broad categories. Property taxes increased a little bit, about 3%, from $407,000 to $416,000. State aid declined a little bit, from 148 to 130. Other revenue decreased about $160,000. That's mostly sales tax in the general fund. Most of the other revenue categories were pretty well unchanged. So that decrease in other is pretty much all sales tax. And then you can see here the expenditures in the townwide general fund. Overall, about a $38,000 increase, about 5% from 21 to 22. So, not all that dramatic. You can see the general support category pretty much unchanged. Transportation's up about 10,000. Benefits pretty well unchanged. And then the other category, which is everything else, increased about $20,000. So you can see that fund balance has grown in that general fund townwide in all 3 years in varying amounts. Quite a bit more of an increase in 21 than 20 or 22. So this page shows fund balance for both townwide and part town combined. So you can get a sense for both of them together and see how fund balance has changed in the different categories. And this also breaks down the restricted fund balance into all of the different reserves, so that you can see kind of where those reserves have gone over the last couple of years. The non-spendable fund balance is just made up of prepaid expenses. It has to be shown as non-spendable because you've already spent the cash. There's no ability to change that number except for more prepaids. The restricted fund balance, you can see the different reserve funds at the end of 22 combined. Total reserves was about $290,000, an increase of about $70,000 from 2021. And then 21 had a little bit of an increase over 2020. So those restricted fund balances have grown a fair amount over the last couple of years. The committed fund balances pretty well unchanged from year to year, 59,000 to 70,000 to 78,000. So some growth, but not dramatic. Then this chart shows some ratios, comparisons of fund balances compared to both current expenses and future expenses based on the budget. And you can see that those ratios have been pretty stable over the last couple of years anyway. There was some pretty significant swings from 2020 to 2021 as a result of some pretty significant growth in fund balance during that year. Remember, we showed there was, pretty big growth in fund balance during 2021. And now that 21 and 22 both had pretty stable, less increase in fund balance, you can see that these ratios have pretty much leveled off, comparing fund balance to current expenses. And then you can see at the bottom of this page, because the budget for 23 is quite a bit higher, the ratio has gone down a fair amount. Okay. This page shows some of that same fund balance breakdown for the highway funds. Again, this is both highway funds together. And again, you can see the non-spendable has grown quite a bit over the last couple of years as more was spent prepaid. There was some vehicle purchases in here that had been, cash had been outlaid, but the vehicle isn't in yet. So that's the main reason for that pretty significant growth in the prepaids there. The reserves have increased over the last couple of years from roughly 600,000 to about 660,000, and then at the end of 22 to about $715,000. And then the same ratios for the highway funds that we showed for the general funds a minute ago. And here you can see, because expenditures in the highway fund in 22 were quite a bit higher than they were the 2 years prior, you can see those ratios have changed, quite a bit, down to 51% of expenditures in the assigned fund balance. And in the total fund balance, a decrease from about 207 to about 145. The fund balance to future expense ratio increased a little bit because the 23 budget is a little bit less than what was budgeted for 22. This just shows the total fund balances in the other funds. You can see here, we did include the general fund Parktown, both of the highway funds. These were in those other slides, but we just wanted to show the total fund balance for those. The ambulance fund has been pretty stable, a little bit of an increase in 2022. Water fund has grown both of the last couple of years from 114 to 150 to 174,000. Fire protection is just paid in, paid out, so there's no fund balance there. And the capital projects funds, both were closed out during 2022. So there is no fund balance at the end of the year for those. The last couple of number slides are some nice charts, graphs that I wanted to show you. And so this chart and the next page is government-wide. So this is all of the funds combined, showing revenues and expenses by category so that you can get a sense of, on this slide, where the money comes from. And you can see in 2022, about 70% of total revenue in the town came from property taxes, which was a fair increase from about 56% the year before. And that really shows the shrinking sales tax compared to the other, the other revenue. A lot of that was sales tax, and sales tax shrunk, and property taxes had to grow as a percentage to reflect that change. And then this shows the expenses, again, broken down by category. Because the highway fund had a lot more expenses in 22 compared to 21, you can see the transportation category quite a bit higher, from 18% up to 31%. The general support, the public safety, the public health, the home and community service, those pretty close year to year. The other category includes employee benefits, and that's, it also includes debt service. That's everything else. And because the transportation was larger, that other category was smaller from 22 compared to 21. And then the last thing that I wanted to point out, I talked about changes in accounting standards. So in 2022, the town and all governments implemented a new statement on leases. We looked at the leases that the town has. None of them were material to the financial statements, so there was no effect as a result of the implementation of that new standard. And then there are a couple of accounting changes upcoming that we wanted to point out, make sure you were aware of. There is a standard that's going to be effective next year on basically computer software and any agreements that the town has with for computer software. The accounting for it or the implementation for it is going to be very similar to the leases standard that was adopted this year. So, you know, we'll be helping you make sure that that's implemented. You'll be wanting to kind of right now kind of gather a list, talk to different department heads, make sure that any software that the town has, you know, that requires annual payments for maintenance or updates or anything like that, that you've got a list so that you know what that inventory is, and then we can look at those and decide if there are any that are material and need to be recorded on the town's financial statements. And then a year after that is a new statement on compensated absences, paid time off. And the way that has been, the way that that's accounted for is going to change in a couple of years. That's not going to have any effect on the fund basis recording, but it may have an effect on the government-wide reporting based on how those governmental activities account for those compensated absences. So, and with that, that's the end of my my presentation. I'd be happy to open it up to any questions anybody might have.
Wonderful, thank you. Does anybody on the board have any questions?
So the compensated absences, do we put anything in like reserves for those?
Michelle is nodding yes.
Yeah, every year we look at basically what yes. And it's through the lens of who's eligible for payouts for vacation and for upon retirement. So we have a reserve that is something to the effect of I can't remember what the reserve is called, but it's paid time off specific, and it's in the A fund and the B fund. We have reserves in both of those, and we look at it on a regular basis and fund it according to what our liability is.
We call it employee benefit reserve, but yeah, we're looking at a variety of things, but it's mostly compensated absences or retirement costs.
What percentage funded is that? Do we know?
Not off the top of my head, but we do have a method.
Yeah, I think part of the challenge is that a lot of the compensated absences only happen if something happens, if it's true, like if somebody qualifies for certain retiree benefits, or if somebody were to just depart. And so you have to make some assumptions. And so we do calculations for the financial statements that say, you know, based on the likelihood of things happening. And then for the reserves, we're also looking at potential changes in rates for the retirement system and other things like that, and the impact that could have on our budget if we don't estimate correctly or don't have good information. So a lot of it is just, you know, estimates based on certain assumptions we make. And then the retiree benefits that are recorded in the financial statements that are the post-employment benefits, we're not funding those. Those are, you know, we're funding them annually in our
Right,
budget.
fund them out of the current budget.
Yeah, those, there's no reserve set aside for that per se, because that's a very big number.
Yeah.
But for what we know are going to be cash outlays that we're anticipating,
Is that growing, by the way?
to look at that. I don't know, because
We only talk about it once a year generally.
yeah, and the actuaries do the calculation based on who our current employees are and what the likelihood is of them being here to qualify for the benefits. And So it's, you know, a complex process that they go through. But I would say that everything only goes up because insurance costs go up, estimated costs, you know.
Well, so to answer your first question, it's 50% of the liability. And actually last year in the B fund, that reserve was overfunded. So we had more than 50% in it, so.
But we don't really know for sure if we're gonna have a vacation payout or something, 'cause we don't always know when people are gonna leave, so.
But you do keep track of what the vacation
Oh,
accrual
yes.
is?
Oh, yes. Yep. Very carefully, actually.
Are those capped?
Yes. Yep. So. Dwayne, I didn't know if you had any opinions about all those fund balance numbers you put in the report. I know we requested more information about our fund balances in relationship to our budget.
Mhm.
But the board, I think, is gonna be looking at that more closely, or the finance committee, and I didn't know if you had any rules of thumb or comments or recommendations about that.
I mean, it's hard to say because, you know, the controller's office will say that they, you know, recommend unassigned fund balance, you know, be like 15-20%, which I think is pretty low. To be honest, I think a higher number than that is appropriate. Those assigned and unassigned numbers, especially the ratios in the general funds, those are, I think, pretty high. And you know, to be at a level where you've got more fund balance than you have expenditures in the general funds, that's a pretty significant amount of fund balance to keep. So I guess I'd say that I do think the assigned and unassigned in the general funds are probably a little higher than they need to be.
You heard it here, the accountants, our accounting firm wants us to go spend money.
Or
I'm
fund our reserves more effectively, right? I mean, because we also need to make sure our reserves are funded adequately too, so that.
Correct.
could be
Right.
something we should be looking at more carefully.
Right. Yeah.
Dwayne, I have a question. We are working on our multi-year plan, our multi-year capital plans.
Mhm.
And I'm curious if Insero provides services for that sort of work. Because what the finance committee is looking at is justifying our fund balance and reserve funding levels with our multi-year capital plans and
Mhm.
other town-wide planning.
Mhm.
So I'm just curious if that's something that Insero does consulting on.
A little bit, yeah. Yeah, we do a little bit of that, you know, fund balance planning and projecting and things like that is definitely something that we do. And I think, you know, a multi-year capital plan really goes along with that because, as you said, you're going to want to, you know, have some reserves or have some fund balance available to reduce the need for debt to make those capital projects happen. So yeah, definitely having, you know, we can definitely do some work in that area to kind of take a look at what your plans are, what your expectations are, and we can kind of see how much of that's fund balance, how much of that's reserves, and how much of that, you know, might have to be borrowed.
And I had another question about the new GASB rule around software.
Yeah.
Based on, we have a handful of software that we have annual subscriptions for, but it's likely to be insignificant or unsubstantial.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm just wondering.
And doesn't it apply when you have an agreement that goes past a year, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So you have a multi-year agreement and commitment. If it's a year-to-year agreement, then we're not as concerned about that. Is that true?
That is true. Yes.
Okay, I want to make sure I understood that. So it's when you have like a 5-year commitment for particular software, and then you have to look at the cost over that 5 years and your commitment to that.
Right. That's correct.
Wonderful. Are there any additional questions?
So if I understand this, bottom line is the audit didn't raise any red flags
That's correct.
That's correct.
they're supposed to be doing.
Yep. Correct.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. We
You're
appreciate all the
welcome.
work you did.
Yep. Happy to do it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Elaine.
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
We do have a wonderful staff. I mean, that's why when the comptroller came through and audited us in 2021, they couldn't find a financial thing worth investigating. So that's why they hit us on cyber and IT, which is delightful. So thank you to Michelle and Flixie and my predecessors in the supervisor's office and town board, all the preceding town boards for their good governance. Moving on, the next item, if the board is amenable, I'd like to handle the next item, which is the elected official, public official, and comprehensive plan steering committee training, and then move up the Title VI compliance draft plan, so Blixie doesn't have to spend all night with us. That's also, so are you okay with continuing with old business A and then moving up the new business? Wonderful, thank you. So tonight we have, this training requirements for elected officials, public officers, and the comp plan steering committee members, a resolution. This is one that the board has now seen several times now. Another pass was sent, it was posted on the website for quite a while. It has been provided to all of the members of the that would be potentially impacted by the passage of this resolution. For the public's edification, this would stipulate approximately 2 hours of training requirements that would impact elected officials, public officers, and advisory committee members. In this case, related only specifically to the comp plan steering committee. It would not impact those on advisory committees, such as conservation and sustainability, the bee committee, the tree committee. Those committees would not be impacted by this. And this policy, or it's not a policy, this resolution has sprang out from conversations both with HR, both with our town attorney, with discussions we talked to last year when we switched to a new insurance broker. There were conversations held with the broker at that point. So this has been something that has been discussed in some capacity for over a year at this point. The idea is that uniform training requirements can provide the best value to the taxpayer in the unfortunate event of legal challenges or insurance triggering events. And quite honestly, they help support a culture of civility and respect that I think that collectively we've demonstrated a commitment to in the town with our diversity, equity, and inclusion policy, and just the general way we hope that meetings are civil and inclusive of all people who want to participate. So I'm bringing forward this resolution tonight. The option, it's pretty generous in terms of the amount of time someone has to take it. As proposed tonight, anyone who falls under one of those categories would have 60 days to take the remote asynchronous training that was provided by the town. And then if they had extenuating circumstances, they could request up to 2 additional 30-day requests, which would bring us up to 120 days total to potentially complete the approximately 2 hours of training. There were many people who actually fall into these categories have already taken the training. There were a number of people, we had representatives from the BZA, the planning board, the town board, and the comp plan steering committee who all took this training in May. In person or they attended remotely, who have already fulfilled these trainings. So yeah, that's that's kind of where we are. Before I open it up to board comment, Blixie, is there anything you wanted to share about related to this? Is there any feedback you?
Oh, no, I mean, I recall being in a discussion about it at one point with a couple of board members and others. Good idea. I think it's important for folks in that capacity to all have the same kind of consistent training and support. And I'm not sure that I have much to add.
Well, the one thing I was gonna point out is that you probably serve on more committees than any of us here, or in different roles. And so
I
you've
serve as a board member. I'm a trustee of the Tompkins County Public Library. I am the treasurer of CFCU Community Credit Union. I work for 3 towns. I also serve on the board of the nonprofit Agua Clara Beach. I think I do training like this for all of the organizations, so I have it completed multiple times in multiple ways, and I coordinate that training for Newfield.
So have you found it's a complete waste of your time to hear it from different people in different ways?
Not really. I think if it's done interactively and with examples, especially of recent case law, which I think our attorney did here, it's really helpful. I think we did the same thing in Newfield last year. I asked our attorney to please give some specific examples of relevant case law and things that have actually happened. And I think that's really helpful to people to hear that. I mean, and of course, in this year in particular, there are changes in the requirements and in terms of New York State and protected groups and what expectations are. So it's important to keep up with all of that too and make sure people are cognizant of where challenges lie. So yeah, I mean, I always learn something. So even though I do training multiple times with multiple groups and different venues.
Thank you. Any board comments?
What is the term public officer represent?
So a public officer it's a state defined term. And it relates to, so anybody who's on the planning board is considered a public officer. There's a public officer law. And the BZA, town historian, those are all the code officer, the zoning officer. But those officials, those 2 positions are staff, so they're already covered under it. It really comes down to planning board, BZA and the town historian are currently our public officials. You can create more public officials if you want. There's actually a test that you put somebody through. I've learned so many interesting things that I can't use on Jeopardy. There's a test you actually put someone through to determine whether or not they constitute a public official, and it involves things like taking an oath. It involves things like term limits, involves things such, or not term limits, but terms. It involves things such as being interviewed and applying. So you can actually create more public officials in a town, but the ones that we consider our public officials are BZA, planning board, and town historian.
Is this, because I had the same question too, just in terms of what that, do we need to spell that out? Or is there other place in our town code that it's spelled out where we?
I think it's confusing if you don't say what it is.
Okay,
At
so
one point we had. Just to make sure, like, when
Sure.
somebody comes up in the future,
Absolutely.
they know what.
So we can include for this another whereas in the town of Ulysses, the public officers listed under this resolution include planning board measures, BZA members, and town historian.
Yeah.
I can, do you want me to draft you something to that effect?
I'm sorry,
Would you like me to?
sure, yeah.
Elected, okay. Yeah, those are appointed public officers, may include persons serving as department heads, enforcement officers, and members of boards such as planning boards and zoning boards of appeal.
Yeah.
So, but for our purposes,
Yes, that's like a real definition.
I think just including, to be completely transparent. on
Sure. I do know that the town historian does fall under that, even though it's not specifically mentioned in there. That has been checked.
And I think
Thoroughly.
that's valid too. They're out dealing with public and.
There's also a component considered to it that they have some form of independent agency in the town, that they have some responsibility more than just a person walking through the door, right? But they're not necessarily a staff member, right? So, and that's certainly true of planning board members, BZA members, and the town historian.
So this resolution is for 2023.
Yes,
Are we going to be passing a resolution like this every year?
the intention would be, and the recommendation from our attorney was to include this in the organizational meeting, that's a very clear place to have it go on in perpetuity, just because it's easy to remember. It can be referred to in the future. And what we've talked about internally is actually in advance of that meeting, actually having the date for the training actually scheduled. We have been able to do that. We originally were able to do that in 2021, but then the date had, or 2022, the date had to be moved. Our plan this year was to actually have that scheduled by the organizational meeting, so it could just be part of the organizational meeting materials. And then it doesn't bind the board to anything more than a year if you decide it's a terrible idea. And it also has the ability then to, as trainings change, we know that we're meeting the ongoing training needs. To Blixie's point, the sexual harassment training requirements have changed. We want to make sure that our training is coinciding with what legal requirements there are, because both the sexual harassment and the civil rights training are state and federally mandated trainings to some degree. So we want to make sure that they're in compliance.
So what does our that online training look like? So, because I was here, I sat through it. So somebody that didn't sit through it, do they just sit and listen to the?
No, it's so the ethics one is a recording, because
It's different than what we got here?
no, it'll be a recording of this one. The other two are actually interactive. By state law, in order for the sexual harassment online training to count, it has to be interactive.
Right.
I don't know if that's true for the federal one, but I know it's interactive also.
Who do you interact?
It's an online, you interact with the
So
program.
answer questions or
Yes.
something after.
Yeah, there periodically throughout the course,
Mm.
there are questions about what you just used. And there's someone speaking, but there's also videos and scenarios, and then there's questions and they stop. And you have to answer them.
So if I want to get the link with Chris.
So if this is passed, Blixie will be in charge. Well, my office, the supervisor's office will be in charge of it. And by that, I mean Blixie will be sending, well, at least be pulling the materials together, and she'll be either contacting people directly or I will.
I can assign courses to people and then it automatically issues a certificate. There's a test at the end also. It issues a certificate of completion that I'll get notified and the person who completes it will get one too. So that we have documentation.
And the training is provided as a service of our relationship with Confidence Trust as our insurance broker. And so it's all part of the, what's the name of the,
Tompkins Insurance.
no, it's
The
Mineral.
platform is called Mineral. It's, they have a whole catalog of different kinds of trainings, including OSHA trainings and other kinds of
Right.
relevant employer trainings.
Right.
So
Okay.
So there's no additional cost to the town.
So my question with that, if that's different than what we got in here, why couldn't somebody, like in my case through Cornell, who's got something equally as rigorous, submit the same thing?
That's Howard's.
So what the attorney has said, and what we talked about before, is that the only way that the town can affirm that those programs meet our standards is to actually go through and certify them ourselves. And so the onus is on the town to be able to say that that alternative program, we can affirm that we know it meets the standards. And there's no reasonable way the town could actually accomplish that. And to the other point is that, I mean, Blixie doesn't have time to go through and take other trainings to verify that. I mean, someone would have to take it. And the other point that has been discussed is ideally, we'd like to get as many people taking the in-person or online training with us as possible. Because I've taken the Cornell training and it is rigorous, but at least the training I took, and I know there's different trainings offered to different people, but as an instructor, I took training that was very specific to me being an instructor at Cornell. And the scenarios presented were ones that reasonably I could come in contact with. That's not the same thing that you might come in contact with in a municipality.
That would be like what our youth program would need.
So our youth program actually gets, this past year, as Rachel presented last time, she arranged for very specific youth sexual harassment training that's applicable for the students. So they did receive training that was very specific to scenarios they might find themselves in, because an 18-year-old or a 17-year-old might find them in a very different situation than one of us might. And so I agree, like that personalized training is ideally the way it's happening. I mean, I would love to see, it's not possible, but 100% participation, but we can't, it didn't seem fair to me to require 100% participation, because it's not reasonable to expect that everybody's available on the one day
On the 18th.
on the 18th of May.
Right.
So that's not fair to everybody.
Yeah,
So
you had
this is
good
trying to-
efficacy on that date.
I'm sorry?
You had really good,
We did.
Yeah.
We had great attendance. We had representatives from every board that would be impacted by this. So ideally we can hit more next year. But I think it's really, ideally, that's what we'd like to see, is if people can attend remotely, and if they can't even attend right in the room with us. And I think having a date on January 4th or whatever date we pick for the organizational meeting, knowing when that is and being able to build that into their schedule might make it easier for people to plan around, knowing when it is.
Okay, that's fine. It
Okay,
hasn't been moved yet.
it hasn't been moved. I will, well,
discussion, and then we moved it, and then we
No,
voted.
we didn't have, we should have. moved it
Yeah, it's
before the
okay.
discussion.
So I'll move it with the amendment.
the amendment to just, yes.
Including the public officers. or
Yeah.
Public
Definition.
official officer,
Uh-huh.
public officers.
Yes. You know where it was before? It was when we were considering making a law. And it
Okay.
didn't make
I
it
knew
into
I
a
read it
resolution.
somewhere.
It's when we were considering making it a law.
Okay.
So I will specify the public officials refer to the public historian.
This is a, go ahead,
This is just a resolution. It's not a law.
but it'll be a policy.
It'll be a resolution. Yes, it's enforceable. We don't need to pass a law. Originally, I wanted to pass a law
Right.
so that it would be codified in zoning, and that from time to time, the proposed law said from time to time, the board will set by resolution the trainings. And we would have then done the trainings in January, scheduled in January in the organizational document. By law, we don't have to do that. I was just trying to make it very clear that we're taking these actions, but that did not go over super well. So, and we don't have to do a law at all. So just doing it by resolution, this doesn't bind the board or doesn't bind anybody in the town past December 31st. So then we can,
So I see that you have extensions, but what happens if I turn into a pill and decide, oh, Caitlin, I'm not gonna do this? What, are we just gonna see how our participation is for now?
yes, that was my intention. I mean, there always are mechanisms to ultimately remove somebody from different positions. I would hope we never have to come to that
Right, right.
situation.
That's-
But I think there are times when people are up for reappointment, and whether or not they've taken it, I would imagine would factor in potentially to current or future town board members' considerations on whether or not to appoint reappointment. I mean, I don't see this as being like a first step to doing anything other than, I would really like people to take the training and all of us to be on the same page to the best of our ability. And
Yeah.
doing it by pure encouragement doesn't necessarily produce as much results as saying, hey, no, the board is saying we'd really like to see this happen.
Yeah.
But if someone doesn't take it on day 121, I can tell you my plan is not to, I don't know even who I would call, like there's nobody to call other than them and say, hey, would you please take this training still? And let them know that they're out, they're outside the time window. But hopefully I'm hoping it doesn't come to any of that. So I can tell you at least Liz was on at the comp steering committee, there was no concerns.
I think most of the.
A lot of people
people
actually
have
already took it.
taken
Yeah.
Did they do the online version?
a lot of them were in the meeting.
We're here.
And then a couple of them had called in remotely.
Okay,
And
yeah.
I think only one or two
The
people
room
were
was
gonna
full,
do it
so.
for, yeah, we're gonna do the online version.
Mhm.
So, yeah. Planning board was here. Almost.
It's been moved, but not seconded.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
All right.
Aye. Thank you. And let us move forward to bringing up the Title VI compliance draft plan. And I know the board did not have time to review this. I did not expect you to have time to review it. It was kind of an overlapping trying to get it through all the necessary folks. And so the idea of this meeting was simply to introduce it. And then we will pick it up again at the August 8th meeting. But Blixie has been the mover and the shaker behind making sure that we fulfill compliance. And I think I will preface this by saying that we are truly the beneficiaries of having you with experience in other municipalities and running into other situations in other municipalities. Because if you didn't have that, I don't think we would realize that we needed to take care of this. And so thank you very much for bringing this to our attention. So I will turn it over to you.
Well, I will mention that we did discuss this in our last finance committee meeting, and so a couple of you have seen this. This is a revised draft from the finance committee meeting after attorney review, but it's substantially the same. What really brought this to my attention was the fact that the town of Newfield had received a large federal grant from the Department of Transportation for a culvert, which here soon too. And we were audited by the Department of Transportation for civil rights compliance. And the town had to quickly put together and adopt a plan like this and a number of other policies. And so, and it's not that this is nothing, there's nothing new about what's in this plan in terms of laws and regulations and requirements. What this does is it puts it together comprehensively and in a way that shows that the town is going to monitor and have a system for making sure that we're complying with civil rights regulations. And none of those regulations are new. None of those laws are new. But it does provide a framework and a responsibility for the board, for the staff to really take a look at what's happening and make sure we're being compliant. And that includes matters of employment, it includes matters of procurement, it includes accessibility to services in the town. It's everything. So, so this is designed to make sure that we're being mindful about our compliance with those laws and regulations, and it provides a means for anyone, staff or public, to file a complaint and have a mechanism to do so and have it be easy and clear for that to happen. So, and again, I put myself as the person it would come to, because often it's not unusual for these to be HR related things. But that would just start with me as a collection point, and then, you know, I would obviously bring it to the attention of Caitlin, attorneys, and whatever else needed to happen at that point in time.
So I have a question. So we just put out a bid for painting.
Correct.
And went to 3 vendors, I guess. And we put it out and we got back.
Which I did, well, we got back 2, but only 1 for this calendar year, so.
So was there anything in this compliance thing that we would have had to do in putting out a bid that we didn't do?
No. Now, when you're dealing with federal dollars, if you get a federal grant, there might be requirements that you have a certain percentage of your spending with women or minority-owned businesses. And that's a requirement of the federal dollars. That's not a requirement of the procurement policy.
So we're getting a grant for the bridge.
Then that grant will specify what those requirements are, and then you have to follow their procurement standards.
Did we do that with our other bridge?
Yeah, the cemetery bridge grant, that whole process really gets pushed off to the contractor. They are the ones who have to prove the work that they did. And there's often, at least when it comes to bridges, it's a percentage that they have to work with, so they often get a qualified survey group, and that takes care of it all. Where they have to make sure that they're on the cemetery bridge, the actual contractors were needing to make sure that there were women on site every couple work days, you know, and it really is pushed off to, so it's built into the cost on that.
And we're administering a grant right now in Newfield, a smaller grant for a sewer project, where even our engineers that are pretty much managing the project for us had to subcontract with another group that specializes in some kind of engineering that is a woman-owned business. I mean, so everything, they're managing that process for us, and they're making sure we're complying, and that's generally what will happen. But the grants are usually very specific with percentages and what you have to do.
I will say that this gets us ready for compliance matters. I don't think there's going to be huge change in operations implied in adopting this, but as Lucy said, it does provide an avenue for if there is an issue, people have a really clear, this will be posted on the website when adopted, and it's really clear what people do, which is, you know, the least we can do at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna pick something random. A service that the town provides that should be accessible to the whole community, is your recreation programs, right? So if somebody feels that they didn't have access because of their protected class for some reason, or they felt that they were specifically discriminated against, it gives them a way to say, hey, you know, I have a problem, I think something wasn't right. I don't think that would happen here, but if there was a problem with services not being accessible to specific groups, especially particular protected classes, this would be a way to bring that to the board's attention, because you might not even be aware of it.
So where does it go? The complaint goes to you, but then where does it go to be adjudicated?
Well, I would bring it to Caitlin's attention, and then we would work with the attorneys. It kind of depends on what it is, right? Most, in my experience, most complaints are HR related, not services to the public. Where you might have a complaint from someone against an employee who said something or did something, and somebody files a complaint. Or you might have an employee who has, even a member of the public said something to them or harassed them or something like that, who's having trouble. And they might come in and file a complaint. You know, it sort of goes all ways. It's just a uniform way for someone to indicate they feel they've been discriminated against based on these civil rights requirements. So, and then it depends on what it is. And often investigation has to take place. And then that would probably be conducted by the attorneys. Is that,
Yeah.
does that answer your question? I'm
Yeah.
sorry. People are looking at me like,
No, no,
I'm not sure what they're thinking.
It doesn't sound like anything new.
It's
No,
not,
it's not.
no,
It's
That's
just,
what I
it's
said,
more,
none
it
of
just
this is new.
formalizes
It's
it.
kind of an
exactly, that's
Yeah.
exactly right.
None of this
Yeah.
is new. It just puts it in a place where you can say, yes, we have a plan to make sure we're complying. We have an avenue for people to easily file a complaint. And we have a system for managing it. And when the Department of Transportation comes in and does their audit,
We're gonna get a
have
gold
that in
star.
place.
They'll find something else on it.
They might want you to do
Look at your
something special
computer.
for
Yeah,
them.
exactly.
They have all these things that you have to sign off on for them, but at least they know that we have this plan.
Okay,
Well, and I don't know for a fact, but I know that the fact that now we have a DEI statement, that's actually been a box that we can check on grant applications now.
Yep.
And I wouldn't be surprised if this is also a box we can check, even though I don't personally have experience with it. Because I know we had to affirm when we took the ARPA money that we were in compliance, and this is now a very clear demonstration of that. So, yes, we're formalizing
Yeah.
something that we were already.
So will this come back to us for a resolution and then?
It'll come back, yep. and-
Okay.
and so people, if you have more questions in the interim, I'll bring it back. Or if you have any questions or edits you want to make to it, sooner rather than later would be helpful, but we can even make them in the August 8th meeting if necessary. But I'll bring back a resolution for that.
I would love to see this adopted by the August 8th.
For your-
the-
for your
federal grant.
For the federal grant that I'm
Okay.
hoping you want me to apply for later in the.
Pressure's on.
Wonderful. Any other questions for Blakely before we cut you free at 8:00 something? Thank you so much for being here tonight. We appreciate it.
No problem. And I'll see some of you right
Eight
here
o'clock
tomorrow.
in the morning.
That
I
was Mary
have a
Cheer.
12-hour rule.
Hey, I asked. We can reschedule it if you want, but I don't think it's a good idea.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Wonderful, thank you. Okay, we have next on the agenda, going back to old business, bringing back the social media policy. I did provide new copies tonight. These are the copies that came out via email. There's nothing of substance that has been changed. It's only the attorney making sure that we have tweaked and clarified everything. I'm perfectly happy to take time now if anybody wants to take the time just to read through it, just to make sure you feel comfortable. If you recall at the last meeting, really where there was significant discussion was related to items L and M, the last two. So Rich, that's where you provided some really great feedback. In particular, I incorporated what you talked about. I wanted to make sure that read correctly to the town board officials, and then we added M, which was designating a communication officer. Town attorney has reviewed this. He's perfectly fine with the language as presented, but obviously it's a policy, not a law, so we can make changes if anybody would like to see them changed. Actually, I see one change we need to make. In I, it refers to the town's information management officer, and in M, it refers to the communications officer. Which would you like it to be? And we will make sure that that's the same. It can be either of those terms.
Communications,
Okay,
a little clearer.
so I will change I. That. That's
All media communications will be approved by the, I don't know what that means. Will be approved, they're gonna look at everything that goes out and.
yes, so, and that's,
Well, Who's that person?
we're gonna
That's
appoint Carissa.
Carissa.
In the resolution, I'm suggesting, and she volunteered also to be willing to do it. She effectively serves as this role already in terms of the website and in terms of the newsletter. So she really is the gatekeeper for both of those spaces. And so this would just be adding a Facebook page or whatever. In the resolution itself, I'm only specifying establishing a Facebook page. The town board has the power to decide which platforms we use. And at this point, our only intention is to use Facebook.
If I was to post something on Facebook, Bruce would have to approve it.
She would have to approve it if you post it on the town's Facebook page, not on a personal one. But you won't have any capacity to post on it because it's gonna be only an administrator can post on it, and she's gonna be the administrator. So you wouldn't even, unless you stole her password. I mean, really, that would come down to be the only way someone else.
And you're not allowing comments,
Right.
so, you know,
It's a website on Facebook with comments and everything disabled, so.
It hardly sounds like social media, it's not very social.
that's a good thing.
Yeah. I think there's, we
We
have,
want people to come here.
well, and there are plenty of places for the town square phenomenon. I don't think it needs to, I personally don't think it needs to be on the town's
Right.
Facebook page. We really are seeing this as a way to push out information to audiences we may be missing otherwise.
Hmm.
So that's really the rationale behind a Facebook page.
You know what, Twitter too?
Not Twitter anymore.
Now it's the
X.
Yes.
Come on,
That-
you
Well, that's
gotta keep up with
weird.
it.
Keep up with it, man.
I didn't hear.
Rebranding is happening.
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah,
So you
we're
want
gonna
me to
kill the
move
bird.
this? Has this been moved? No,
It
no.
has not
It has
been
not
moved.
been moved.
So we'll move this.
Yep, and that appoints Carissa as the communications officer. Thank you, Carissa, for being willing to do that.
We're just gonna make the change to.
Is that part of this or?
So it's not, no, so the policy itself just creates an opportunity for us to appoint a communications officer. And then the social media policy on page 2 of our resolution packet. The town board adopts the social media policy and then it appoints Carissa as the communications officer through December 31st of this year. And it approves the establishment of a Town of Ulysses Facebook page. And it should be without, or no, it's the resolution is correct, with any outside chat or outside posting options disabled. So really locking that down. And then at the organizational meeting, this will become one of the many jobs that they get assigned on an annual basis. So is there a motion? You
Yeah, I
moved it?
moved it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion or comment? With it, and it is with that alteration of I making it the town's communications officer. Communications officer. Okay, then all those in favor? Aye. Thank you very much, Carissa. This is. I would also like to take this opportunity to apologize publicly to Carissa, and I'm gonna apologize because I said something at, I believe, the last town board meeting that was inaccurate. The last town board meeting, I thanked Rachel Kennedy, who is now taking over our youth employment program, and pointed out that the town, that this was the first time the town was working with contracts with the job sites for youth employment. And I learned after the fact that, and it comes as no surprise, is that when Carissa ran the program, she also required contracts. So it's only been for the intervening 7-ish years. I don't know how many.
More than that, I think.
10 years?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I'm like, well, I know how long Ethan was with us, but I didn't know what lag time there was between you and Ethan. It was only during the after Carissa era and then now in the Rachel era that we've had contracts. There was a lag time. So I very much apologize. I did not mean to besmirch your integrity and your diligence to protecting our kids. So, and the town. So, thank you for that opportunity. Off agenda to clarify that. And then the social media policy, we are to the water district extension policy. This is, it got very slightly tweaked by Nate today, our town attorney. It didn't change anything substantive from what was posted online. And it's just the formalizing the terminology to make sure that it was correct. Again, it's a policy, it's not a law. It lays out a process. The resolution linked to this policy directs the town supervisor and the town clerk to develop an application form that can be shared with the public reflecting the specifics described in the policy. So we have not developed a form yet to push out to the public. But that form would have the information as laid out in the policy that we would be collecting to best understand who may be interested in public water and what they would need to do to kind of petition the town board essentially, without needing an attorney to put together a formal petition. We've talked about it now a number of times, but
I'll move that.
wonderful, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion on it?
I like how they just 1 and 2, I think separates it.
That was Chris's very good idea. Chrissy did some
That was
wonderful
very clear.
reorganization.
Kind of got lost in the overall policy.
It sure did. And it didn't realize how lost it was until she reorganized it. I was like, oh, this makes really good sense.
Yeah.
And then you guys said you're gonna keep amending this as time goes on.
I
Like
would
a living
anticipate,
document kind of
yes,
idea.
I have a feeling that this is gonna be one of those things that periodically we're like, oh, well, we didn't mean for this to happen,
Yeah.
or we didn't conceive of this scenario. So it's certainly, and as a policy, we can amend it at our leisure.
Mhm.
We will essentially re-adopt it to some degree, sorry about that, as part of our policies at the organizational meeting. The org meeting is the ideal place to update policies.
So see how many requests we start getting.
Exactly, exactly. But at least this gives the public a really clear, I'm really grateful for it because it's gonna give me a clear way to interact with the public when they ask me questions. It's like, oh, well, here's the process, here's the form.
So on the form, is that something that's gonna come out in the next couple of weeks?
But yes, so that's the intention. So we'll start working on that and be able to push it out, but it lays out in the form shall require interested property owners to indicate a range of expense, blah, 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 and it's not that complicated.
Yeah.
So,
It's easy once you know how.
exactly. Famous last words, right? It's not that complicated. Really coming back to the policy for clarification. Awesome. Well done. Any more discussion? Now I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Hi.
Aye. Thank you. And that brings us to Michelle, the U.S. Department of Transportation Technical Assistance Grant for Tribal and Rural Communities. Michelle found a very interesting program, and we wanted to bring that as an item to you for consideration. There's no action being taken tonight. She's just gonna I put some materials in the packet. Michelle can do a bit of an overview, what we might be able to use the grant funds for. And then we would, if it's amenable to the board, we can bring it back for a gatekeeper resolution on August 8th. So Michelle, turn over to you.
I don't know if I have the most updated agenda, but new business B. Do you wanna?
New business.
The public
Public
works
Works.
Oh.
discussion.
Well, you know what? Why don't we just do the transportation one because you're here, and then we'll do the voucher, and then you can leave, and we can talk about the local law, and then you can at least get 4 minutes early. Or the rest of it.
So this it's a technical assistance program, so it's a pretty not traditional grant program. It's no local match up to $350,000, and this is targeted towards rural and tribal communities. And so this is really be a stepping stone phase to get you in a position to apply for other federal funding. And they aren't expecting, they're really expecting rural communities to come with, I don't want to say half-baked, but they're really not expecting you to have firm numbers in your budget. It's not quite loosey-goosey, but it really is a very approachable grant application and program. The reporting requirements are pretty minimal. It's meant for technical assistance for, like I said, a project that is in a phase that just needs a little bit of a push to be ready to apply for federal funding. So, what was the other aspect of the grant that I wanted to mention? Oh yeah, the application's 4 pages long. It's a very simple application. No local match, I already said that. So the idea that I am sort of rolling around at this point is something that is on our multi-year planning document that we've had our eye on for a while, and it sort of is the next phase for our asset management process. We started off in access, just our culverts, access database, just our culverts. Now we have all town assets. We're in a GASB compliance. That's been incredibly informative to our multi-year planning process. The next phase really needs to be that we have more elegant software, more sophisticated software that's GIS based. The position that we got in with the asset database that we have now was sort of the way to get GASB compliant with the resources that we had. It didn't cost us very much, but the next solution up is pretty will be expensive to implement. So this would allow us to be in a position to do a townwide stormwater assessment where we could strategically plan for what culverts really need to be replaced or rehabilitated based on stormwater modeling. And we need that asset data, GIS-based asset data, to really be able to implement a variety of different projects like that. So that's just an example of one of the things that we could do once we have our asset data in a GIS. So GIS is spatially, so we could have, so the end product would look like the town, the highway staff, they go and do some sort of remediation to a culvert, whether it was blocked and they had to unblock it or it was flooded. They can go on their phone and click on the culvert on the software and update it immediately for what maintenance they did. And so projects like this are, I don't think any town our size really has GIS based software for their assets. But my argument for this grant application is really that that's where we all have to go. If we're going to be ready for climate change, we have to have data-driven information that we're making decisions on a multi-year basis. So that's my spiel about what I'd like to apply for this grant. And it's sort of it's really low-hanging fruit. It's highly competitive, but it is the first of several funding programs that's all through Bill. So I think that this program really is designed, we're poised to take advantage of this. I don't think we're like golden children by any means, but I think that we do have a competitive application that we could put together. I'm not hopeful, but I wasn't hopeful with the cemetery bridge one either. Here we are. So.
Are we rural enough?
Yes, we are rural enough. Yeah, there's a very complicated process that you have to go to confirm that, but yes.
Certified rural.
Certified rural. I took a screenshot of certified and all.
Out of curiosity, this GIS program, what is the typical cost for that?
So I have only spent time really concept mapping this. If the board feels comfortable with this, then I would spend time with consultants on the phone trying to get rough order of magnitude.
And then would there be standing maintenance?
Right, yeah.
Support that we'd have to pay out every year?
Right, yeah, the annual cost would definitely be a major consideration of this. This is a direction that I think the town has to go anyway, and it would be for all townwide assets, so it's across all departments. But yes, the annual cost is a huge part of this consideration as far as feasibility goes. The eligible costs within the program do include staffing, so this really, if we get this money, it could be all the effort really could be completely offset by these funds, at least for the duration of the project. They're anticipating that they'll award in December, that contracts would be executed in December. I'm smiling because I think that that's for the federal government. We'll see, because this program really is meant to be super accessible. So I think they're going to try to streamline and simplify things for small government and tribes. And there's an 18-month duration, so it would have impact on 2024 and 2025 work plan. But because we have money to hire a project manager, for instance, I'm not concerned about the workload or the budgetary impacts. But back to your question, the first answer that we have to get is the annual cost for the ideal program. What's the annual cost, and does it make sense? I think that we're in a position as a town we have some hard realities coming up about how much IT is going to cost in the future. This is the way that it's moving, and it's expensive, but it's the way that you have to do business these days. So.
And that would include, like you mentioned, culverts, but water lines or
Eventually. Yep.
So that if there was an issue, you could just go right on the tablet or and know where to fix it.
Right.
Identify what year it was fixed.
Yes. Right.
And it's all town assets, including like computers and.
No,
No?
it wouldn't be. It would be infrastructure based. I mean, we could potentially
Highway
do.
stuff.
Yeah, and water. Yep. And buildings, our buildings would be on there. All of our land would be on there. Probably not road signs. You know, there'll be some exceptions to things that might not make sense, but potentially we could store all of our asset data in here, and it would, you know, for all of our IT stuff, it would be town hall, you know, that would be the location at town hall. So,
Okay,
yeah, it's not gonna take me a lot of time. My estimate was about 10 hours, and I've already spent 3 hours, so.
When is it due?
So this is another funny thing, August 14th at 2 PM, and it really does have this crazy Hunger Games feel to it where it is first come, first serve, they say. So if you qualify, if I submit at 2:02 and I qualify, and the person, you know, there's a municipality that submits at 2:03 and they qualify and we score the exact same, I get it because I'm a minute sooner. So it's a very strange way that they're doing it.
Or do they only open it up at a certain time?
2 PM on August 14th.
But
Which
they
is-
they share the questions in advance, and then you have to like dump them into their application and submit as fast as
And
possible.
you can't
like-
save the application. It's a one-time thing. You can't come back to it. Yeah, it's wacky. It's the first time they're doing it, so I'm sure there'll be lots of change in the next round, but. And that's the other thing is that there'll be rounds of this, so if we have this ready to go for the future, we can just update specific points.
So were you thinking of coming back on the 8th?
Correct. And in the application, if the Title VI compliance gets passed, we can put that in there because they do ask you to demonstrate the feasibility of your municipality to be able to work with the federal government in this way. And that's one of those low hanging fruit items that puts us in a good position. If we have that, that's an indicator that we've got our ducks in a row in that way.
okay,
Awesome. Cool.
thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Thank you for finding it and bringing it to our attention. Awesome. While you're still here, I would like to move up the payment of audited claims quickly. So we normally do, for the public, we normally pay our bills at the first meeting of the month, but there is a method to the madness to why we're doing it now. So Michelle, would you like to introduce this?
Sure. I'll start by saying that this contract was executed today. Our contact from this company came by today to test to make sure that there wasn't lead paint on the outside, and he confirmed there wasn't. And so the scheduling for exterior painting projects is based on weather. So we potentially,
So it's the original.
what's the question?
No, that was the original.
Oh, gotcha.
I was gonna sign this one.
We could potentially, you know, if the weather's great, he could start before August 8th here. I don't think that's gonna happen, but we basically wanna have this ready to go, for when they can start. A heads up on this is that there are 2 windows on the back side of the town hall that look like they need to be, I don't know, resealed, the seat, what is it? Resealed, maybe. They're essentially rotting away, and so.
The stone tilts in, so the water sits on it, so the bottom of the windows are rotted.
Right, so like, how do you remediate that? I'm not sure.
Replace them.
Just have them pour epoxy in it for now.
Right. So, but it's at the point where, it's the window, if you're
Supervisor's
facing,
office.
yeah, on the left, and then in the planning and zoning, it's also the window on the left in both of those offices. So we're gonna get that quoted from Ernst and have that as an addendum to the contract if it looks like a good quote.
Okay.
So that'll be coming up at some point too.
So we, you actually provided it, and I don't think I got, did you print out physical versions of the resolution?
I didn't, I'm sorry.
Okay, let me pull it up. I have it. If we give one, it's in the memento. You say,
I can read it.
oh, that'd be great.
Resolved that the Ulysses Town Board has reviewed and approved payment of claims for voucher 321 in the amount of $8,140.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second,
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Michelle, may I give this to you
Yes.
to pop on? imagine it goes to Flixie next.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us going back to the local law creating a Department of Public Works. There are printouts of the draft local law. And it was posted to the website. It's a pretty basic local law model for DPWs, Department of Public Works. So we looked through tonight. This is not your final time to look through it by any stretch. My intention would be to bring it back to the town board on August 8th and schedule a public hearing on September 12th. And so when we schedule the public hearing for the local law, we want to make sure that it's the law that we're considering adopting. And it's in the form that we're considering its adoption. So we take it to the public in that form. And so if you have any concerns or tweaks you'd like to see to the draft law, then we would need to make them before we schedule that public hearing on August 8th.
So when this position comes up for reelection, what's it gonna be called? Is it gonna be called Public Works, Head of Public Works, or Highway Superintendent?
No, the position will continue to be highway superintendent, and then the town board has the right to assign duties. And this to the town, all of us, to me, to the clerk, to the highway superintendent. We have the right to assign duties. We do assign duties. This basically at the January meeting every year, we would appoint the highway superintendent to be also the commissioner of public works. And it's actually embedded in the law that position, so under 40-3B, in addition, the Department of Public Works shall provide all services required or desired in order to enable the Director of Public Works to fulfill any duty or responsibility imposed upon such official, whether or not in his or her capacity as town highway superintendent by this chapter. So we're basically wedding the highway superintendent to the Department of Public Works commissioner, or the Director of Public Works is the title, the official title, and it'll continue to be an elected position. Moving forward, then someone who runs for highway superintendent will know, because it's a town law, that when you become highway superintendent, you become our Director of Public Works as well. So, but it remains an elected position.
It doesn't change the status of the other workers in that department, though.
It's gonna be literally a department change name. It's not gonna change them, because in the contract, ironically, is well set up to move towards a public works contract, specifically because we already have public works type jobs in our union contract for the highway department, because we have water. So this will really simply be a formalization of what the work we're already doing in the highway department, but have never formalized that work to be done. And for instance, before Scott, the town was contracting with private individuals to do mowing. And Scott ran the numbers and said, I can buy a mower and a trailer, and in a year, essentially it'll pay for itself. And it's cheaper for us to do the work ourselves than to pay a contractor. Typically, highway departments don't necessarily do that. Like, they don't mow cemeteries and things like that. It's codifying what the highway department's already doing, and this really cleans up responsibility for who has oversight for water. It does not make sense to have your town supervisor have oversight in water, so we clean that up by making Scott the water supervisor for this year. But prior to that, it was technically my role, and let me tell you, this position is probably the least qualified to oversee water in the town. So unless you have a person in the position who just happens to have water expertise. So I don't think that's been the case for my very competent predecessors. So this isn't going to really have any substantive change on anything day to day. It doesn't have any accounting impact. Michelle confirmed with the comptroller's office, this doesn't change anything we do from an accounting standpoint.
Talk to the union manager.
There have been preliminary conversations that are positive. We've not formally engaged them. I was waiting till Rich is my negotiating partner. And so the next step is for me to reach out to the union rep, and we'll start putting a meeting together to discuss. At this juncture, our intention, or my intention, and I think that we're on the same page with this, is the only change we'd like in the contract is to the title of Highway Department to Public Works Department.
But since the highway superintendent is not part of the union,
Mhm.
why even that's all it is a name change? Why do we need the union's agreement?
We actually don't. It would speed things up. We have the administrative right
Right.
to change that around, but in the union contract, it specifies the highway department. If the union was not interested essentially in changing the contract, and that may very well be the case, it doesn't slow us down. We continue moving forward, but what it does mean is that any new employee in the Department of Public Works would not automatically become a member of the union, because the union would be only covering the specific people under those specific titles. And that, so my guess is most unions want to grow potentially in membership. So, but the staff, when the highway superintendent just introduced the concept of moving to a DPW model, my understanding is it was a very pleasant, congenial conversation that there didn't appear to be concerns. Maybe they might
My
be.
only concern is when this goes to an election, you want the public to know. I mean, it seems to me moving to you want to somehow vote for the head of the Department of Public Works, not only the head of the highway department. People are used to voting for the highway department, but shouldn't they be voting for the head of Public Works?
There by law, we have to have a highway superintendent, and I don't believe we have to have a director of public works. Some towns, I would imagine a number of larger towns have a highway superintendent and also have a director of public works, and it might be different positions. What I would suggest is that I can have Nate attend the town board meeting on August 8th, and we can have some of these conversations, or if you wanted to do an advice and counsel session in advance. I'm sure he'd be happy to speak to us if they're concerned about it.
That's my only thought.
I can also solicit that specific question. If there are other questions, I can ask him and I can share the information, share his email back. If that's useful. Okay, sounds good. I'll ask him that question.
But I think that's valid. We don't want somebody coming in saying, I went to the water.
Right, you
Just
want
make it very clear.
Yeah.
It's DPW.
Well, I mean, the challenge with elected officials, you can always have an elected official who says, I don't want to do my job. But if you make it very clear under local law that this is the position, all of a sudden we have more teeth. And in fact, Scott brought the DPW idea to me initially, and then we brought it to the board formally, because he was concerned he was doing stuff that had never been formally assigned to him. And he was concerned that in the future, a different highway superintendent might not be willing to do
Exactly.
that.
But that's why I think if you just keep it highway department, the highway department said, I got elected to do highway, I don't have to do DPW.
They can essentially say
They
that.
can do it
regardless.
anyway,
They
it's true,
can.
but the title at least has the public hold some accountability to the position of the supervisor of public works rather than just title. I just think it's more transparent.
I agree it is. I don't know if we have the legal right to
Right.
do
Yeah,
that,
can
so
you
I can
do
check
that?
on
I
that.
don't know that you can, probably not.
Probably not.
Well, but I will check because I'm not paid the high hourly rate to be a municipal attorney, so I'm not an expert in this, but we have someone who can tell us that, and I can get that question answered, because if we have any flexibility, I agree with you. Okay. Any other questions? Well, if anything comes up that you think of, feel free to to let me know, and then I will otherwise plan to bring it back to the town board. And truly, if there's still questions on August 8th, we can push this in and have another conversation and not schedule the public hearing. Like, we have some time, so I don't want anybody to feel like we're under significant pressure to make sure that the public hearing is scheduled August 8th. We're not, we're in good standing. It will not take effect until January 1st either way. Okay. So that brings
I have a
us,
question.
Yeah.
Did Bart get confirmed for?
Yeah.
yes, he did,
It's
at the
in
last,
the minutes.
Yep.
Okay.
and that brings us to the minutes. But before we get there, just a note that we have our regular meeting on the 8th. We have our town board retreat at 8 AM bright early on August 10th, and that we have canceled our the second meeting in August. And that brings us now to approval of the minutes. Did everybody have a chance to look at them, or would you?
Obviously, I did. And I abstained.
Well, you weren't here anyway, so.
I can't even vote.
Well, actually, you can vote, but you actually can vote. There's no prohibiting to vote on minutes that you haven't actually, meaning you haven't attended.
But since I've revealed my ignorance.
But I don't know if you had a chance to review them, so I'm perfectly happy moving them to the next meeting if others didn't have a chance.
I'm fine with the meeting.
Okay.
minutes.
So,
I'll move to.
Second.
Third,
okay, and Carissa,
Move
we
to
had
approve.
both sets of minutes, is that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to double check to make sure that that everybody got them. So the 11th and the 14th of July. The 14th was a special, very short special meeting. Okay, there's a motion, there's a second. All those in favor? Aye. An abstention
Yeah.
and one abstention. Thank you. And that brings us back to privilege of the floor. Is there anyone in the public, was we have a public here? Is there anyone online, Krista? Nope. And there is no one online, so I will.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Rich, we-
yeah, we decided we were gonna have to record you
All right.
next time you're.
There was the
you're
lag.
absent.
Yeah, we missed you. So